All right, and we're good to go. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, we are delighted to be here. We can't wait to get started and share with you um, our open pedagogy and the CC certificate program, a small case study, and a big provocation. So I will let my colleagues introduce themselves and share their big provocation. My name is Jennryn Wetzler, and I'm the Director of Learning and Training at Creative Commons. Jonathan, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Poritz. I spent 100,000 years base 2 as a professor of mathematics and computer science in various universities. And I'm now living in Italy and doing sort of gig work in the open movement. I've been facilitating the Creative Commons certificate course for maybe as long as we've had us second round facilitators doing it, for a long time, and really enjoying it.
Hi, everyone. Suzanne Wakim. I am the Distance Education and Student Learning Outcomes Coordinator for Small Community College in Northern California. I also do OER work for the state, and I have been facilitating the Creative Commons certificate for quite a few years, although not quite as long as Jonathan. I think you were in the cohort that trained us, so that was exciting. So hi, thank you for letting me be here today.
Both two of my favorite people in the world. So I'm so glad that you both can facilitate and also be here. This is, really exciting to also be with everybody here from SUNY and other institutions around the country, and I think some international. So I know folks are probably just starting to wake up and get their coffees and have a slow start, but if you're willing, please do introduce yourselves in the chat. I'd love to hear who you are, maybe your name and affiliation, and then one thing that brings you a sense of power in life. So please do introduce yourselves, and we would love to get to know you a little bit more as we go through this. Okay, so I want to quickly give an overview of Creative Commons CC certificate courses, so you have a basis in what we were trying to do before launching a couple open pedagogy pilots in particular, and then we'll get into the provocation. So hopefully everyone will be fully caffeinated by then. If not, I think the discussion will caffeinate you. So the CC certificate program is our kind of flagship program at CC for training people around the world in open licensing, in copyright and copyright considerations, the public domain, and this set of recommended practices for engaging in our different digital spaces using open licensed content. So our goal is to really upskill, if you don't mind that word, people around the world in open licensing expertise, but then also connect them to this incredible community of other open advocates, whether they're focused in education or open culture or open access or other fields. So we've had participants from 65 countries graduate from our certificate courses. I think we have over 1,500 folks who have graduated so far, and more coming. And with the certificate program, they are better equipped to serve as the point person or liaison at their institution for federal or foundation grants that require open licensing of grant resources. They are generally kind of pinpointed by colleagues as an expert in CC licensing in general. And then we've seen them do really incredible things. So some participants have, after graduating from the course, have created their own master's level courses in open pedagogy for K-12 education, or their own OER courses or faculty workshops, or different conference presentations, or even online tests or otherwise. We've had a number of graduates also translate the certificate course content. So by the end of this year, we will have 10 the course content available in, I think, 10 languages, which is really special. And we just can't wait to see what is coming next with our alumni community. We were lucky enough to bring on Shayna Hollick onto the team, and they are teeing up an alumni program to make sure people have the ongoing training that they might need, the ongoing access to mentorship or the ability to mentor others in the communities that in which they serve in the future. So we can keep expanding access to these open materials and training. So technically, the CC certificate is mostly offered as a 10-week online course or a 1-week in-person or online boot camp. It is geared toward educators, academic librarians, or cultural heritage specialists. So 3 tracks, but really the course is open to anybody who wants to join. So we've had folks from a very wide variety of fields participate, such as architects, lawyers, NGO representatives, college administrators. We had a college president enroll at one point. We've had, just a whole range of different folks gleaning something from the course, which is great, whether they are already open advocates in the field, very well established, or completely new to OER. So we welcome everybody. So a couple main elements of the course are trying to support participants wherever they are. We recognize that a 10-week online course is a big commitment, and we want to make sure that people don't feel like they are having to do kind of mindless work to just get, the check mark or the grade for the certificates that they can pass. So we really encourage people to use the flexibility that we provide with our assignments and final project to make the most of the course and create something that actually serves them in their daily work. That is one of the open pedagogy elements that we really strongly encourage. We also have a practice with facilitators of kind of an ongoing discussion with participants. So when they submit something, often a participant may have missed an element, or a facilitator may say, that's good, but would you consider things in this light? So they would kind of engage in a back and forth discussion, and participants are encouraged to resubmit their work if they're not satisfied with their mark. So those are a couple ways that we, in all of the courses, try to encourage more of the open pedagogy elements. But then we also are amping up our support for engaging in kind of wider communities. So beyond the 25-person cohort of the course, we're encouraging participants to create something that might serve other open education advocates or other community members further afield, whether it's developing a conference proposal for something that they want to teach, or something else. So there are a number of different kind of threads that run through all of our courses that are considered open pedagogy, I would argue. But I was so grateful to Suzanne and Jonathan for being willing to kind of take the reins and just run with this a little bit more. So each facilitator did a slightly different experimentation with with open pedagogy elements. I want them to talk about some of the things that they did and what they found in terms of participant responses, so that we can all have a discussion in just a little bit about what it means to engage in open pedagogy, and if there's a difference between open pedagogy and good pedagogy, and what some of our assumptions are around those 2 phrases. So maybe I'll turn it over to Jonathan first. I know he's been working a number of, doing ungrading in a number of his courses. So Jonathan, any thoughts?
Sure, thank you, Jennryn. So it's a great course to teach. I taught mostly classroom mathematics courses filled with students who didn't want to be taking math, and so it's a very different environment of people who want to be learning about open licensing, and a really great community. As Jennryn said, there's a lot of work to be done in this class. I think some people who sign up for it are surprised and think, oh, it's going to be one of those online classes where you take you click a few radio buttons at the end of doing a very light bit of reading and watching a short video, and then do that once a week for 10 weeks and you'll be done. And there's some serious work to be done. But as Jennryn said, we tried to sort of bring in, we tried to practice what we preach. So I think that's an interesting thing to try to do as a teacher. Sometimes maybe that's not the right thing to do. Maybe we'll come back to that in our discussions, but certainly in the open world. So for example, CC lives very much by the idea we're teaching people about openness. So the CC materials are all openly licensed, right? And so the things that, and also the things that students, sorry, Jennryn really likes, and we call the students participants and the facilitators. I spent a whole career calling them students and teachers, but to de-emphasize the sage on the stage and the and so on perspective. So the participants, you know, we highly encourage them, if at all possible. It's interestingly sometimes not always possible, depending upon your contract with your employer, but to openly license the artifacts they make as part of this assignment. And as Jennryn was saying, we often want those artifacts to be useful to people in their lives. So it will help you if you're building a handout for your colleagues, or a website for your library, or something like that, or a position paper for your museum. Maybe you'll want to distribute this more widely. So putting an open license on it is a good thing. As part of practicing what we preach, and helping the participants practice this new skill. I, as someone for quite a while, I think sort of before we talked about it as open pedagogy, I kind of asked, I don't know if I asked you, Jennryn, I sort of started doing it, and Jennryn was very kind to let me do this ungrading thing, which I'd heard a lot about. And I think we can talk about this in a few moments, and we go into a more general conversation where this fits directly in the context of open pedagogy. I think some people would definitely say it does. As giving participants agency and more control over their learning and so on. So let me tell you the way I did the ungrading in the CC Cert course. There are these, there are 5 units in the course, and each unit has a culminating assignment, and there's a detailed rubric for the assignment. It's interesting, it's such a global course. Lots of people come from educational systems where rubrics are not things they're used to. So some folks have to be sort of educated a little about what a rubric is. But the easiest, and the rubrics have specific numbers of points for each of the rubric items. And one way to do this is for each of the facilitators to simply give each participant a score for each of the rubric points, total up the amount for that part. The thing that I've been doing for quite a while is I give them an enormous amount of feedback. I'm following my friend Laura Gibbs, who's big in the ungrading movement, and she says all feedback, no grades. So I just give a lot of I can do it sort of filling into the rubric. I give them a general comment, and then I say, look, on rubric point 1, you that was great. Wouldn't hurt to add this other point, or you could explain a little bit more here, or it seems like you maybe skipped over this rubric point. And I just give them lots of detailed feedback, and then I give them a 0 on the assignment, which is a little bit scary, but because of the LMS we're using a free instance of Canvas. It wakes them up, and they realize they have some feedback from me, and then they are asked to at that point, what I ask them to do is to go through and look at the feedback I gave them and maybe make a revision. As Jennryn said, we encourage people, we sort of view this as sort of a dialogue, and we encourage people to maybe add that extra thing, or if they're super busy and they can't, they don't have to. And they often submit a new version for me, and then I give them more feedback. And we go through this cycle as many times as they want to. I've had folks, the last session actually I facilitated, not the current one, but the previous one, I had folks, a large number of folks who would go 6 and 7 cycles on revision. They really, really wanted everything perfect. And then at a certain point when they're bored or out of time, where they feel like they've reached a good place, I ask them to pick numbers for themselves on the different categories up to the maximum of that rubric category. And then I just enter that number into the Canvas grade book. So that's you may have heard about ungrading. There have been some great books about it. Susan Bloom has a book called Ungrading. Jesse Stummel has a new book come out, which I haven't read yet, but it's also on the topic. He's a great speaker in the ungrading world. And the idea of ungrading to giving learners more agency in their knowledge, what they care about, what they think is important. They will grade maybe themselves more harshly or with more attention to detail. If they don't care so much, maybe they'll be very easy on this. So anyway, it's a way of giving them more agency, and within a lot of structure, though. The structure of the rubric is still there, which I think will come back as a theme in a minute. And I found it very successful. As I mentioned, I've been teaching math for years and years, and I have lost track of it is the most common thing. My interaction with students is, why did I get a 63 and not a 65? I really need a 65 on this midterm because I need to get a C average for this. I hate talking about grades. And I don't ever talk to folks in the cert course ever about grades, ever. I mean, I talk to them about the content. They do a revision, and they expectantly wait for more feedback from me, and I say, oh, that was great, loved the way you added that extra thing that I pointed out you could add, or so I think it's really interesting as a pedagogical tool. Whether it's open pedagogy or not, we can discuss in just a minute, and I found that very successful. And I think that was kind of my big innovation, which Jennryn was happy to let me go with, and I'm happy to keep doing. I don't think I'll ever go back to grading. After I started doing it in the Creative Commons course, I in my last couple of semesters before I quit my professorship in Colorado, I was also ungrading in my classroom classes there, so I really enjoyed. Maybe Suzanne can take over now and talk about the specifically ungrading pilot we switched to most recently, or however you want to continue.
Yeah, I think that I think I'll kind of talk about the shift we made and then lead us towards the provocation. So the course originally, and this is what Jennryn was alluding to, is it already had a lot of aspects of ungrading. We gave folks a rubric that was pretty detailed, talk about this case study, talk about this piece of it. But beyond that, we allowed them to create any sort of assignment they want. And we got the gamut of all sorts of really wonderful and creative things. And we encourage folks to share them, right? There's a document where they can share out what they've created, which is another aspect of open pedagogy, right? It's the options of creating something that's useful and then also sharing it back out with the community. What we did for the pilot is more specifically call it ungrading, right? So the shift was more a shift in terminology and a shift in focus. We also made the rubric broader. So rather than pulling out the list of nuances, we had broader categories for folks to consider. And being a good pilot, we let folks pick which of the two they wanted, the traditional version or the open pedagogy version, and they got their assignments based on their selection. And I don't know, Jonathan, how your class was. Mine was pretty evenly split between how many people wanted the pilot and how many people wanted the traditional. And the pilot version, what was interesting about it is this actually came out of the 1-week boot camp that had been designed, and that was traditionally a face-to-face. And so we took that and made it into the 10-week course, which, as Jonathan mentioned, is 5 modules with a culminating assignment at the end of it. And because of the larger, so what was interesting to me, and this is where we're going to lead to the provocation, we gave folks bigger categories. So rather than a rubric, which is very much a check mark kind of a thing, the broader categories were meant to get folks thinking in bigger picture and create more personalized versions of the assignments. And it did that. What I noticed, though, is a lot of folks took that broader category and treated it like a worksheet. And this was especially because it was like a Google Doc and it was written out in a table format. And so I had people just typing in the box the answer to the question, which is the opposite of open pedagogy, right? So it was kind of fascinating where we were taking a very kind of focused shift towards what we're calling open pedagogy. And notice I'm using the air quotes because I'm leading us into that part. And participants were actually taking that and going more traditional. And it was fascinating to me how many people literally treated that like a high school worksheet where you type the answer in the little box. And rather than creating the kind of creative things that I've seen in the other version. And that's not everybody. A lot of folks did create very creative presentations and audio and some really wonderful things. And one of the things that kind of struck me is the folks that treated it like a worksheet, it worked really well for them, right? And so in my mind, I was expecting them to create these mass, beautiful, wonderful things, which works great for some people. For others, having the nuanced thinking through each piece at a time is how they learn best. And it was kind of nice to see that the goal is to learn the stuff, right? Like that's the whole point of it. And how they do that, I think, is less important. And so giving them those options was really helpful. So that's the kind of the how of how we changed the course. And Jennryn, do you want to take us to the provocation, or you want me to do that?
Go for it. I think you're on a roll.
Okay. So the question that we really wanted to ask with this, and the discussion that I think will be really helpful to have here, is in the open world, we talk about open pedagogy as though it was an actual thing. Like, we have a term, we have a phrase, that means it must exist. And I'm a biologist by trade, and so I like to put things in boxes, right? There's the genus and species of each thing, and they all get their own little box. And so if we give it a name, it means it has a box. But if you look up open pedagogy in the literature, in the conversations, there are, I counted 5 or 6 different definitions, totally different definitions, right? Some of them focus on teaching strategies that work around the open licenses, so really focusing on the openness of it. Others talk about giving students agency in their learning process, so focused on the individual agency as a way to make it so the teacher isn't quite so, I don't know what the term is, right? So please.
On stage.
Yes, so we're not the sage on the stage, right? And others really focus on the sharing, right? So open pedagogy is all about the sharing of content. And yeah, add to your point in the chat, is it open or is it OER enabled, right? That's one of the big definition divides. Constructivism on steroids. I love that. So this, I think, is what's going to lead us to the next piece of the conversation here, which is, what is it? Like, what is open pedagogy? And I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much. So
Yeah, can I?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Can I jump in quick for just to I totally love the way Suzanne has framed things. I guess I also wanted to say I'm like Suzanne, I have a STEM background, and I really like definitions of things. And one thing, when we were having a conversation about talking about these kinds of things as a group of us, it occurred to me, I was in a presentation once, again mentioning Jesse Stommel. He was in Denver, and he spoke about critical digital pedagogy, and he gave a sort of very interesting definition. I spoke to him afterwards. I said, Jesse, are you just saying this is another way of saying good pedagogy? And he thought of one. He said, yes. And so I've often heard people speak about open pedagogy as if it were a synonym for good pedagogy, which kind of bothers me. We have a word for that. It's good. We don't need another version of the word good. So I really would love, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we need other versions of the word good. But I think that it would be really interesting for people to contribute, as Suzanne was saying, all these different perspectives, what you think we'd like to get people to discuss here. I don't know exactly the format we're going to use on it, but what do you think are crucial elements that make, that's not just good pedagogy, that's good open pedagogy. What is it that you allows you to put the word open on? And if Jennryn doesn't mind, I have a little mini rant about the word open too, because the word open, which I promise only 30 seconds on. So the word we should be using here is free. If you look at the history of the modern digitally enabled open movement began with the free software movement, and the word free is bad in English because English is a poor language. Free means free as in beer and free as in speech. And as famously as the otherwise terrible person Richard M. Stallman said years ago. But it was switched to open source software to be more neutral. But other languages have, I live in Italy. It's libero is free and gratis doesn't cost anything. And so really the word the word liberal arts education, the phrase liberal arts education doesn't have anything to do with humanities. It has to do with training people to be free people in society. Right, so that's the historical origin. Really should use the word free. Unfortunately, we switched to using open, and so I think it behooves us to sort of think why we're using that word and what it is about openness. Is it open licensing? Is it something in pedagogy that matters, or really just saying good, or are we saying free as in unencumbered by other people's rules, which is another version of free. Sorry I interrupted you, Jennryn.
No, not at all. I think that really helps with teeing up this conversation. I think the only thing I wanted to add was, I know in some other either conference sessions or conversations, we've also talked about how this movement as a whole has evolved over, the last 20 years, and well, 15 to 20 years. And it's been interesting to see how initially there was kind of a fixation on just the tools to allow this, I guess, this free, as Jonathan was saying, or this this liberal possibility open up in education. And then we moved away from thinking of the main crux of it being just the licensed content, and much more about the practices and some of the applications and so on. And yeah, part of me wonders if we are just in open pedagogy efforts, if we are just applying the skills and the tools that we have at hand in this current context for good pedagogy. Anyway, I would love to hear what others in the audience think about this and what their experiences with open pedagogy are. I see some really great, thoughtful comments in the the chat. Thank you, Ed. I'm very curious about this fetish of definitions as well. But if anybody's willing to either unmute their microphone or type in the chat space, we'd love to hear from you about maybe sometime when either you tried an element of open pedagogy with your work, or maybe you had an experience. And it doesn't have to be good. It can be bad. We want to hear about all different experiences, as we just shared, some of our mixed experiences as well. So I'm going to mute and try to give folks just I think a solid minute of silence to think about this and type. I'm going to actually set the timer, because I otherwise will fill the air with chatter. And then, yeah, I'd love to see what folks come up with. Okay, so timer. You can see that close to my face. All right, that's the timer. You can't see it, but there we go. So I want to put folks on the spot a little bit. Has anybody in the audience had an experience where maybe there was an effort to bring more agency to students, an effort to kind of explore something that goes beyond just the specific classroom definition or assignment or response on a test or otherwise, and make something a little bit more meaningful to the student or their community? Has anyone had an experience like that hasn't gone well? And maybe it's just us.
Yes, maybe we should say that the pilot that we did in the cert course, we didn't feel was super successful. I mean, I think there was we did as Suzanne described, and we it wasn't bad. We didn't have a 100% failure rate or something, but we felt like students thrashed around a little bit. So as Suzanne pointed out, they treated it as more mechanical. We felt like it was not. I would not, without making some changes, want to repeat exactly that same experiment. So in a certain sense, we tried something and it just didn't really, we gave them more agency, we gave them more openness, and it didn't seem like open was the same thing as good. So Ed, you had a heart on your, was that because you had a successful one and then when Jennryn added the addition that she didn't
Well,
want
she
it
didn't
to
go
only
negative till
some-
the very end. She was like, everybody
Right.
has experience
Well,
where
share-
you've
please share something you did.
students and given them agency and
and it was terrible.
and then it stunk.
I mean, no, please share positive stories too. I guess I wanted to see if I could hook anybody with.
You know, I sometimes build websites with students. It's one of the things that I like to do. And one website that I built used gravity forms to kind of structure the content and had multiple questions, then turned that into the posts that the students would share. And much like what you were saying, I had that go like a worksheet because there were defined questions that students filled out. And then I had another project that was, you know, tied to the pandemic. We started to do a pandemic diary project that we left much more open. We didn't give them the structure. And so we were asked for diary entries, and all of a sudden we had like photo essays and we had interviews and we had other things being submitted. And it, you know, some of the you know, not every entry was a beautiful work of art, but man, some of them were so creative and interesting, and partly because we didn't put up as much structure, and we had a prettier website with the one that was built on gravity forms, and made sure that, oh yes, make sure you upload a featured image and make sure you answer these 3 questions, and then those will be put in together and I'll set the headings for you. But we had a much more interesting project from the pandemic one.
That's so interesting to hear. Yeah, I want to note one thing that came up in the chat. We have 10 minutes left. Thank you for that reminder. I know Stephanie and then Sophia also have their hands raised. So just really quickly, I know Christine noted that she's had professors who gave us expansive choose a paper or a presentation or visual representation of your learning options when she was getting her master's. And she stuck to a traditional approach, mostly because she was afraid of getting it wrong. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Christine. Okay, Stephanie, you had something.
Sure. So what I worked with some colleagues and we used government documents, which are in the public domain, and we used open pedagogy to engage people with it, just to get them introduced into how you can explore government documents to create, to discover background stories. We've actually published a few articles on it, but people got so excited because they thought the government documents were just these kind of dry materials. But by getting them into it and posing a question where they could do some exploring, and the question was very vague, what we did is we highlighted celebrities from World War II. So we had so there's Julia Childs, there was, who was the composer, Miller? I'm sorry, he was a general actually. And so we did a bunch of research with that. And then the question was, how did they sacrifice in World War II, and left it very broad, and they did research and created a story. And so it was very exciting for them to actually see that there were interesting stories. They got into the FBI vault and the CIA and just got to be able to see these different stories. So it was very exciting for them and opened a new type of research for them.
That is really interesting. Yeah, that's a good case study. Sophia.
Hey, so I worked with a class last semester who had an open assignment. They just had to use our archives in some way at Oneonta. And we felt that students were much more engaged with the materials and reading everything in such a way that they actually were trying to make, these were all freshman students, that they were reaching out to sources beyond the archives. They were connecting with faculty members throughout the campus, and really creating connections so they could change the program they were in. Oneonta has, it's called College Camp, like 100 acres. And there was a student who didn't really know about the program very well and was able, because of this project, was reaching out to people to use College Camp and her biology program as a place to possibly raise bees. And within that conversation, she found out that there was already a faculty member who was raising bees on campus. And she was just making all of these fantastic connections for the community. And it was really wonderful to see.
I love that. I feel like a lot of folks in this audience probably also appreciate that, because I was looking at the things that give us connect us to power or give us a sense of power, and everyone was noting, you know, the connectivity with others, or like working on some common building some common element, or running in the snow. But yeah, that sounds really great. Wow. So we have about 5 minutes left. I want to see if there are any other comments here. Oh, thank you so much, Ed. I can't wait to take a look at this. I opened one of the links that you shared in a separate tab, but I'm going to definitely open the one you just shared most recently. Stephanie, thank you for sharing. You just shared an article about integrating open pedagogy to explore government documents. Fascinating. Yeah, I'd be really curious about working with FOIA and government documents from the other end. I worked for the US Department of State for 8 years. So we were very kind of sensitive about, what would be, FOIA-able for the other side. So I can't wait to read this, this article. Thank you. Jonathan, Suzanne, any additional thoughts on where what we should do next? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was wondering if we're running short on time, but Stephanie, if you had just like you used the phrase open pedagogy about in your post, in your chat post, the article about integrating open pedagogy to explore government documents, and you said you when you spoke, you said you used open pedagogy. What is it about that that makes what you did open pedagogy? Can you just say super quickly, because the public aspect of it, is that sharing publicly?
Yeah, so the idea of it was we wanted to introduce, mainly we spoke to educators, but as a way for them not to have kind of a throwaway assignment, but that students could do something with this. They could actually solve a question. We use the example of Hunter Scott, and I don't know if you know the story of Hunter Scott. He actually went into politics later when he got older, but as an 8th grader, he did a History Day project, and he was sitting watching Jaws with his dad, and there was a scene where they were talking about the USS Indianapolis and how it had gotten bombed, and most of the people died from that bombing because of a shark attack. And he asked his dad, "Is it true?" He said, "I don't know. Why don't you do some research for History Day?" And so he did a bunch of research, and actually they were the USS Indianapolis went undercover because they had parts of the A-bomb and they didn't want anybody to know about this. So that's why nobody was rescued for over a week. But then unfortunately, the Captain McVeigh, he was court-martialed for supposedly not doing what he was supposed to, but there was no way he could have. And this research that this 8th grader did brought a bill to exonerate him in Congress. So he actually changed history because of his research. And so getting those kinds of ideas where that students can actually make a difference with their research.
So I think that's a great conclusion. Lots of people have been saying that it's the public aspect of student work that makes the work pedagogy. Is something that, as Suzanne and Jennryn have been saying, we sort of had that kind of built in for a long time in the course, and when we tried to emphasize it, weirdly, it didn't seem to be more effective. It's, if anything, was slightly less effective. I don't know. As a math teacher, I've always, no one wants to see their arithmetic homework put on a public website, right? So, and maybe does that mean we should never teach arithmetic? I would say yes, but maybe we should never teach calculus. I would say no. So I think it's interesting to think about, is by making something public always going to be an improvement on the pedagogy? And if that's what's going on in open pedagogy, it's kind of an interesting thing to learn from that.
I think we're experimenting more with the open or the more public aspects of it, like building for a public resource or project in our boot camps. But yeah, it is super interesting to see folks' reactions. We are 1 minute shy of our time, But yeah, it's just so wonderful getting a chance to kind of pop the hood and share with you all a little bit about what we intend to do, and also what you know, what we're finding with participant experiences, like what works, what doesn't, and why. And my one takeaway from this is that the more we can allow for these different experiences rather than prescribe, this is just the right approach. This is, you know, this is open pedagogy, and this is exactly how it needs to be enacted, and this is what the experience you need to have should look like. The more we can avoid that, the better with the CC certificate courses. So that's my takeaway. I don't know if Jonathan and Suzanne, if you have any last closing remarks. Liberated pedagogy. I love that. That's a great one.
Happy to go with you. I think it's a great concluding point.
All right. Oh, 6 definitions. I was wrong. Thanks so much, Ed. And thank you all so much for participating. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference, and we will hopefully all overlap in some capacity in the future. Take care.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording here.